Have you ever gone on a vacation and had unexplainable occurrences that lacked any explanation, or if they had one, were still just crazy? Well, today, we're going to go over stories just like that from Reddit. If you like content like this, be sure to like and subscribe as it helps us out a lot. Let's begin one. My cousin and I got off the train late, did not have accommodations set up, walked around but found everything booked, and decided to find a park to sleep on a bench. My cousin immediately falls asleep. As I am trying to, I hear a loud scream like a lady or child being murdered. I loudly whisper, "Cousin, did you hear that?" "You woke me up, I didn't hear anything. Go back to sleep." This happens 2 more times, and the final time, my cousin says, "If you wake me up again, I'm going to beat the piss out of you. Go to sleep." Now, I'm under my sleep sheet, like a 4-year-old hiding in his bed from the monsters in the scary movie he just watched. Next thing I hear is the roar of a lion that sounds like it is in the bushes next to me. I peek out my cover and I see my cousin standing over me. "I heard that. Let's get the F out of here." We quietly and slowly tiptoe out of the park, every step thinking a lion is going to pounce on us from the bushes. Eventually, we get back to the train station, spend the rest of the night there, and in the morning have the brave idea to go back to the park thinking there would be police and a murder scene waiting. There wasn't. No police, no murder scene. And in fact, no matter how hard we tried, we could never find that park again. It was just like it was never even there to begin with. We have never gone back and don't have any plans to either. 2. My first time in Key West, staying at La Concha on Duval Street. Something touched me on my arm while I was in between sleep and awake. It felt like a warm hand on my forearm. I woke up too freaked out to open my eyes, but it definitely felt like something was in the room with me. Turns out the hotel is pretty haunted. 3. My friend and I were driving through Crete one night after sunset. At one point, I thought I saw something white about to step out onto the road in front of us, which startled me because we were on a major road with no houses or pedestrian crossings. But almost as soon as I saw it, it vanished. It didn't really bother me in the moment. I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, I must have been mistaken." But then, in the same heartbeat, my friend half slammed on the brakes. "Sorry," she said, shaking her head. "For a moment, I could have sworn that you saw someone in white about to step into the road." I finished for her. It was the weirdest thing. We don't know what it was. I suppose it could have just been a plastic bag or something equally mundane. It was just odd that both of us had mistaken whatever it was for a person. 4. While on my gap year, I went to stay with my godmother and her family over in Australia. To start with, it was little. Easily explained things like my wallet not being where I put it and so on. My last evening staying there, I volunteered to go and bring out another bottle of wine and beers for the group. While in the wine cellar type room, I got whacked on the back of my head. I was a bit startled, but fine. Thing is, everyone was accounted for upstairs. The room had high ceilings, and I was in the middle of said room at the time. To this day, that has to be the creepiest thing I've experienced. 5. This happened a couple of years ago, and I still can't shake it. It was the kind of weekend you look forward to. A camping trip with a group of friends, deep in the woods of northern Michigan. None of us were beginners. Most of us had spent years hiking, camping, and just being out in nature. So, when we found a secluded spot near a lake, away from the usual crowds, we were all excited. We set up camp and spent the day fishing, swimming, and telling stories around the fire. As night fell, The forest around us seemed to grow even darker, but the firelight kept the shadows at bay. That's when we heard it. At first, it sounded like the usual forest noises: rustling leaves, the occasional owl, maybe a branch snapping. But then, in the distance, we heard something else. Something too deliberate. Something heavy moving through the underbrush. At first, we thought it was a deer or maybe a bear, but there was no growling or typical animal sounds, just the deep crunching of something large pushing through the trees, followed by a low, guttural growl that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was my friend, Aaron, who first saw it. He stood up from the fire pit and moved toward the tree line, squinting into the dark. "Hey, what the hell is that?" he muttered. We all turned to look, but it was hard to make out anything beyond the shadows. The moonlight was weak and the trees were dense. But then we saw it, a shape moving quickly, almost fluidly, across the forest floor. It wasn't big like a bear, but it was huge, too wide to be a deer. Its movements were unnatural, and there was something off about the way it shifted between the trees. It stopped for a moment. We froze. Then it stepped into the dim light, and we all saw it. I can't even begin to explain what it was. It stood on two legs, like a man, but its body was covered in dark, matted fur. The face, it wasn't human. It was like a mix of a wolf and a human, but with features too distorted to describe clearly. Eyes that seemed too wide and unnaturally bright, and a mouth full of sharp teeth that looked almost too big for its face. Its hands were long, clawed, and it seemed to be sniffing the air, like it was searching for something. It was like staring at a nightmare. The thing stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching us. Then, it did something that still haunts me. It tilted its head, almost like it was studying us, like it knew we were watching. And then, it grinned. It was a smile, but not a human one. It was full of malice, like it found something amusing in our terror. I don't know why, but I felt this overwhelming urge to run. It wasn't just fear, it was primal. Like my body knew I was in the presence of something that was not just dangerous, but wrong. Before we could react, the creature turned and sprinted into the woods with terrifying speed. It was like it didn't even touch the ground. We couldn't hear it running, just the sound of leaves being crushed underfoot. We all stared at the spot where it had been standing, frozen. It wasn't until we heard the distant howl, sharp, unearthly, that we snapped out of it. Without saying a word, we packed up everything as fast as we could and left. We didn't care about the fire, the tents, or anything else. We just ran. We made it back to the nearest town hours later, shaken and silent. The local store clerk gave us a weird look when we asked if there had been any sightings of strange creatures around those woods. He didn't answer right away, but after a long pause, he said, "You're not the first to ask about that. A lot of people have gone missing around those parts. You shouldn't be out there after dark." I tried to do some research later, but I couldn't find anything concrete. There are stories of creatures. Some say they're Bigfoot, others say they're Wendigos or skinwalkers. But what we saw didn't fit any of the descriptions I found. It was too fast, too malicious, and too intelligent. I still don't know what it was, but I'm not ever going back to those woods. And if you're ever in northern Michigan, especially near the lakes and dense forests, just remember one thing. If you hear something moving in the trees at night, don't look. Just don't. 6. To say first, I am an investigator. Have been for 30 years. I'm biased. I was staying in Gettysburg with my martial arts class. Nothing to do with investigating. At the Colton, which has a rep, but not in the room I had. We had a suite 4 rooms and a kitchen to my memory. Middle of the night slamming, thumping, and then at my door, I swore I saw a soldier. I totally discounted it as confirmation bias, since of where we were, but it did shake me up somewhat. Years later, my wife and I went there and rented the room that is supposed to be haunted with 0 results. I have traveled to Gettysburg 14 times. I've had 3 of them with experience never documented with my equipment, as it's the one place I reserve for experience. Well guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, I encourage you to like and subscribe, as it truly does help us out. With all that said and done, God bless you and your family. Stay safe out there.